So we're going to determine the implied domain of these two functions here. Now, there's two things so far that we have got to watch out for. Number one, we've got to not take square roots of negative things. And number two, we cannot divide by 0. So to figure out what the domain is for a function, we have to ask ourselves, if we plug in a real number, does the output, does the y value that it spits out, is that also a real number? And if you plug in a negative into, when you plug in and you evaluate, and then inside the radical it's a negative, then that output is an imaginary number. And if you divide by 0, that's actually an undefined outcome. Therefore, those would not be in the domain of the function. Okay? So this first one, we have f of x equals the square root of 3 minus x plus 1. So we want to find the implied domain. So what do? We look at the inside here. Okay? And we say 3 minus x needs to be greater than or equal to 0. If it's greater than or equal to 0, then we're okay. How do we solve this? Well, I'm going to minus 3. I get minus x greater than or equal to negative 3. Divide by negative 1. But guess what? When I divide by a negative or multiply by a negative, the inequality turns around. And so I have x is less than or equal to 3. So in interval notation, x less than or equal to 3 looks like this. I shade to the left, okay? So I go negative infinity up to 3, and I put a bracket. This is what I'm looking for right here. That's the domain. Okay? And the next one, g of x equals 3 over x minus 9. What's wrong here, what would be bad is if I divide by 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take x minus 9 and set it equal to 0. Solve for x, add 9 to both sides. X cannot be 9, okay? So x can't be 9 here. That's the one value. If I plug it in, I'll be dividing by 0. If I plug in g of 9, I get 3 divided by 0, which is undefined, okay? So every value of x works except for 9. Everything else works, okay? So how do I write this? I go from negative infinity up to 9, and I do a parentheses, and then I do a union because I skip over 9, and I go from 9 out to in positive infinity. And this is my domain. Okay, that's how I want you to write the domain. Okay? So, very careful, because I see students mix this up all the time. If it's a square root, I set it to be greater than or equal to 0, whatever's in the square root. If I'm dividing by something, that's whenever I set the denominator equal to 0. Okay? So, I see students mix this up all the time. So square root of whatever, I mean, it could be a dadgum hot dog, right? I don't care. Square root of hot dog. How do I solve it? I take the hot dog I'll get it there in a second. I'll take the hot dog and I'll set it greater than or equal to 0. But if it's, a number like 5 divided by the hot dog, okay, then how do I solve that problem? Then I take the hot dog and I set it equal to 0, okay? So that's the idea there, okay? So those are the two things you got to watch out for when you're looking for domain, okay? So a solve and a solve. All right, and then this tells me what it can't be. Right? Tells me what it can't be. And so then I do everything but that value that it was. All right? Good luck.